Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Well, it's the end of the month, which means it's time for another Stashin with Stephanie video tutorial. For those of you who have not heard about this, it's a really great subscription program where we send you 12 fat quarters for the price of 10. It's $29.99 a month plus shipping. And then you get a free pattern that you can use to inspire you to use that fabric or any fabric. And you get a coupon code for $10 off a $20 purchase. So if you want to get a finishing kit or more of the fabric to go with it, then you can do that. So it's a great value because we now have, this is our 13th pattern that you get access to for free right away after you join. So that's a huge value. And then you get, of course, all the discounts throughout the year. If you are on it for a full year, you end up getting 18 free yards of fabric. So that's pretty cool. All right, well, let's take a look at the fabric. But first, I want to tell you about this month's pattern. So we're using Social by Melody Miller, and it has a mix of really bright, bold prints with large designs and then some smaller ones as well. So when I designed this, I designed the pattern to make use of that. So we have some really large diamonds and some really small diamonds. And I'm going to go over how to cut all those, how to sew them together, how to get everything nice and in alignment so that you get perfect points every time. If you've never done a diamond pattern before, this is a really good one to start with because it's not that many pieces and it's not that hard to put together. So let's take a look at the fabric and then we'll get started. So this is Social, the first collection by Melody Miller under the new brand Ruby Star Society. Some of you guys may know there was some drama in the quilting world last year. The 5 original designers that started Cotton and Steel left the brand, and the brand is owned by RJR. So they ended up landing with Moda, and they're creating the new brand Ruby Star Society. So if you have always loved Cotton and Steel and the fun and funky prints that come with it, the original 5 designers are now all under Ruby Star Society. So I know that not everybody knows that, and there's some branding that they definitely need to work on. But this is the first collection by Melody Miller, who's kind of one of the big faces of the original 5. And it's kind of groovy. It's got, a lot of rainbows. And then they also have a lot of supporting prints. This one is actually really orange. And it just is really fun. I mean, it's got the rainbows and the phones and the metallic, and so that kind of theme of things you would do socially kind of runs through it. And then of course we've got these fun supporting prints that work with it. I really like this bird print. I actually use this as one of the small prints when I did the pattern because those birds really do work on a small scale. And then I love these cones. They're just really, really cute. One thing I did notice is that the selvages are extra wide in this one. So you'll just want to make sure when you're cutting it that you are not including that selvage in your piece. And then of course it's the whole shade range. It's got that pink, gray, medium blue, and now the darker blue here. This one is actually kind of a hunter green with some blue. And then I love this orange. It really just kind of makes everything pop. And I really like that. So that's the last print. Now let's get started making this quilt. So we're going to be cutting some diamonds out of strips like this, and all the measurements and your cutting instructions and fabric requirements are in the pattern to go along with this. We're calling it Bling, and you can get that over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. One thing you really need to know, and this is in the pattern, is there's 2 different types of equilateral triangle rulers. There's the kind like this that have a point at the top, and there's another kind that has a blunt tip and that top 1/4 inch is gone. So in all of the patterns that we write here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous, we all use the one like this Clearview triangle ruler that has points on all 3 sides. The math is very different if you use one that doesn't have that point, and your pieces are not going to fit together correctly. So first make sure you have got the right ruler. I'm using the Clearview in this one. We'll link it in the video description down below. And of course everything that you need to make this is always available over at our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We'll get the fabric and kits for it while supplies last. If you're a member of Stashin with Stephanie, then you got early access to some finishing kits for this. So I hope you grab those up while you had first dibs on it. But first what I'm going to do is show you how to cut these diamonds. They're not hard to do, but it takes, it's nice to see it before you do it as opposed to just seeing it on a diagram on a piece of paper. So let me show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up any inch, well, your tip is going to be up with the top of that strip. and then you're going to have an inch line even with the bottom. And you want to scooch it over as far to the left as you can without going onto that selvage. And for this first one, I kind of cut, it's a little bit awkward, so you could always, you know, do this on the right side and flip it around, but I just kind of do one of these. Cut right down the side there. In some patterns, you might need this for something, so you can always save it. But in this case, I don't, so I'm just gonna put that off to the side. All right, so since we need a diamond, what you need to do is do a 180-degree flip so that now the point of my triangle is on the bottom, and even with the bottom of that strip. And then I've still got an inch line nice and even with the top, and I'm gonna go ahead and scoot that over so that the tip of this part here is even with the left part of my triangle. That's very important. That's how you get your diamonds to be the right size. So once I've checked that that's in line with the tip at the top, I've got the tip of my triangle ruler at the bottom, and then I'm nice and even here, then I can go ahead and cut along the right side of that ruler, just like you would any other. So now for all the rest of these, we don't have to flip anything. All we have to do is just move our thing down just a smidge. And once you get everything all nice and lined up, just cut it and you are good to go. So you're gonna do that for your large triangles or diamonds. You're gonna do it for your large diamonds and also for your small diamonds. And that's how you cut those. I'm gonna show you how to do the background ones that are for our setting triangles and diamonds next. Okay, so we also have some diamonds to cut for the setting diamonds. That's what's gonna go around the outside, so we don't have to cut into any of our blocks. And for that one, the measurement is just a little bit taller than our clear view triangle ruler, the one that I've used for like everything. It's just a smidgen too tall. So I'm going to show you how to do this using your 6x24 inch ruler. You can do this as long as it has a 60 and a 30-degree angle on it, which is going to look a little something like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange this so I can create sort of the start of my diamond. So I'm going to move that 60-degree mark over. So I've got the 60-degree lined up at the bottom of my strip, and I've got it starting at the edge of the ruler where that little hash mark is that I drew. So normally I would cut across this, but I'm going to go ahead and actually draw this out so you can kind of see what this looks like. So you can see that I've got sort of a half equilateral triangle here, but I've got a little seam allowance here, so that way that can be the very corner of our quilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut on that, and then I'm going to show you how you can cut your diamond from that without having to get a bigger ruler. All right, so I'm just cutting right on that line that I drew. And then this one you can set aside. This is where it gets, it's not hard, but you just have to go slow, be confident. So what you want to do is I'm going to fold this over so that way this little point here is sort of my fold line. So I want to make sure that my edge that I just cut is nice and even with that top edge over here, and that I've got a nice point here that was the top of where I cut. And then I just kind of finger press that down just so that I have a nice sharp edge. And then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay it down even with that edge over here that's folded over. So right now it looks like a giant triangle, but I'm going to go ahead and give that a cut. And now we've cut our diamond, and I actually have a finished block here, so you can always test to make sure that it is the correct size just by laying a finished block on top of it. So here we'll lay that down, and it is the perfect right size. So that's how you can get around it if your piece is just a little bit bigger than your strip. You don't need to go out and buy a new ruler, just fold it over like that and you'll be able to get a diamond with nice equal halves on it. Now for this one, we are only going to use half of this plus the seam allowance because this is going to be on the edges of our quilt. So there's going to be some waste, but it's a nice big piece, so you could probably use it for something else. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to line up 1/4 inch marks of my ruler with the top of the diamond on both sides. And that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance just to the side of the center. If you have a directional fabric, make sure you pay attention to that. In this case, there isn't even a right or wrong side, so it really doesn't matter what side I cut on. So the side that is smaller, that is scrap, so you can use that for something else. But you should have something that looks a little bit like this, where you've got half of your diamond plus just a little bit coming across the top, and that's going to be your seam allowance. I've got one more unit to show you how to cut, and then we are ready to start sewing. This one too is just a little bit bigger than the 8-inch ruler that I have. And so you don't have to go buy another. You can just use the 30 and 60 degree lines on your 6x24-inch ruler to cut this out. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and line up that 60 degree line of my ruler, even with the bottom of my piece. And I'm not going to worry about cutting out the selvage because we don't need this. This technically is also the right size to be your setting triangle if you would like it to be. But I'm just going to go ahead and trim this. All right, so I've cut off this side here, and what I want to do is flip it around, and I'm going to trim up to make our corner of the block. So what I'm going to do is I'm lining up an inch line with the bottom and a 1/4 inch line even with the tip of that triangle. And then I'm going to go ahead and give that a cut and square up that side. And now we've got basically a half equilateral triangle plus a little bit for your seam allowance. So that will get hidden in the seams, and it is going to form your corner for all of your background setting triangles. All right, so let's pull this back out. So just like before, we were kind of flipping things around with our ruler. So we want to flip around again. And it takes some getting used to and learning how you need to flip your ruler to get it to work, because you're probably going to have two 60 degree lines on your ruler. So this one works. If I would line the other one up, it would not look so good. So what I want to do is line up that 60 degree line along the left side that I just cut and make sure that the top of the ruler is even with the tip of that triangle. So now I can go ahead and give this a trim. And now I've got a setting triangle all ready to go. So now, in order to keep on going down, you're just going to keep flipping your ruler around and alternating which 60 degree line you use in order to cut. So again, I've got 60 degree lined up with the left edge. In this case, I've got the bottom of the ruler lined up with the bottom of that strip, and I can give it a trim. And we're good to go. All right, so I hope none of that was too scary. We just really quickly went over how to cut your setting triangles for your top and bottom of your quilt, your setting diamonds for your side of your quilt, and then also your corners, which come out of the same strip as your setting triangles. And it goes pretty quickly. Again, you just kind of have to get used to flipping that ruler around, but it is not hard to do at all. So check that out and get everything cut, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start sewing. So this is the diamond block that we're going to be creating here. And essentially we're going to sew 3 together, 2 together, join these and join that. So it's not that hard. You kind of just have to get used to how you're going to pin, because you're going to have things going in opposite directions, which you'll see in just a second. But this is a really easy diamond pattern to start with. So if you've never done one before, this is a good one to give a go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm first just going to lay these guys right sides together here. And I actually got a little excited and already sewed this one. And before I do that, I probably should give you a tip. So the first thing I did was I took all of my big diamonds and I laid them out, and then I started laying out the pieces that would go with it. So the way I arranged this is so that the ones with the smaller prints would be in the smaller diamonds and the ones with the larger prints would be in the larger diamond. That kind of gives the eye a place to rest with the smaller pieces and helps really let the big print shine. So I took all my piles of this and I split it up and set it out so that like every single block that has this pink ice cream cone print would have this same configuration. And I laid everything out first because that way I wouldn't end up at the end and I would have one print left and end up with like all of the oranges, because that would look not good. So that way, if you lay everything out ahead of time, then you can know if you're going to have some issues, you need to make some adjustments, move some things around because you used, you know, a whole lot of this pink bird early on, and then you didn't have enough variety at the end. So I would recommend you do that. Just take over your dining room table for a little bit, get everything where you want it to be, and then start sewing it together block by block. So I would do one entire section of one large print first at a time as I was putting these together. It made it feel like it went real fast. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and flip this right sides together here. And you can kind of see, because I got excited and I already sewed this together and then I had to pick it out for the video. But you can kind of see where the seam line is. I'm gonna go ahead and mark that with a friction gel pen so you can see it too. So eventually, once you've done this several times, you won't need to mark this every time. But while you're getting used to the seam, it's kind of a nice little way to make sure you get it right. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up the edge of this diamond with the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. And I'm going to go ahead and make a little mark with my friction gel pen at the sides. And this mark is where it should hit the block below it. So when I arrange these guys right sides together, I kind of have a guide of where to line it up and where to pin. So you don't have to pin if you feel like you can just make this work, but if you're just getting started for the first time, it's a good idea to give that a go. So I've got that lined up here, so that way the mark is nice and even with the edge of my pink piece below. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And again, once you get the hang of this, feel free to skip the pins and just go for it. And you don't even have to mark once you kind of get the hang of it. All right, so we've got that nice and in alignment. So we can see that my black marks are hitting right where it's going to be. And this is where it's a little weird because we're used to having things line up really nicely. But in this case, your pieces are going to be going in the opposite directions, and that's the way they're supposed to be. As you can see, when we unfold this, it starts to make a nice straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together in addition to the ones at the top as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and line everything up with the edge of the fabric. And I'm just going to go ahead and sew my 1/4 inch seam. And like I said, I've probably done hundreds, maybe thousands of these, so I don't normally pin, but if you want to make sure that it's absolutely accurate and perfect, feel free. All right, so these guys, I'm just gonna go ahead and flip right sides together. And we can see they are going in opposite directions like they're supposed to be. And I'm just gonna get them lined up and I'm gonna sew the 1/4 inch seam again, and I'm just gonna go ahead and chain piece those. So again, when I was doing this for putting mine together, I did like 6 or 7 at a time, sometimes 8, depending on how many of those big diamonds I was using. And I would just sew like all of these and then all of those and then press them all at one time. I always like to press my seams open, especially when I'm doing diamonds. It makes for really great joints. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put the center of my iron right down that, and I just kind of hold that open with my fingertips and then just go straight down the center. Then I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and repeat from the other side. As long as you open it up with your fingertips first, that will stay open really well. I usually put about 3 fingers down, and it just is magic. It works so well. You do want to make sure you don't have anything that looks like a wiggle on the back, because then that means you have a pleat on the front and your block is not going to turn out the right size because you've pressed some extra fabric into that seam. I do sew with a 2.0 stitch whenever I'm pressing seams open, so it's just a little bit smaller and can handle that a little bit better. All right, so now I'm going to join this set of 2 to my large diamond. It's the same size now, and then the same thing with these 2 to sort of create 2 full rows. Just they don't look like your typical rows when you're putting your quilts together. So again, with this one, if you wanted to, you could always draw those lines out to sort of give yourself a nice guide. I'm just gonna go ahead and flip them right sides together, arrange them, and go. Do the same thing up here, and let's go ahead and chain piece that together. All right, so we're going to go ahead and press this open again. I'm going to make one small difference. Instead of just going straight across that seam, I'm going to lift it up as I come to those seams just slightly and then drop it back down, and that'll help keep the iron from flipping seams in a direction I don't want them to go. It'll keep everything nice and flat. Go ahead and press it from this side. And that is looking pretty good. Let's get that top row. Okay, so this is my #1 trick for getting perfect joins every single time. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this over, and I'm gonna go ahead and mark a line 1/4 inch from the top of that. So I've got my 1/4 inch lined up with that edge of my row, and I'm just gonna make a little mark right across where those seams join. And because this irons away, I'm gonna go ahead and do it on the front side of this one as well. You wouldn't have to do this, you can just eyeball it, and if you've done it right, then the edges of your block are gonna line up. But for just so you guys can see what I'm doing here, it'll be a little bit easier to capture it all. All right, so I use a double pinning technique to do this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my pin in right through that join there, and right where I marked that line that's 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then I'm also gonna put it in right in the seam allowance, right where that mark is also. And if you're really good at knowing what 1/4 inch is, you don't have to mark this at all. I don't at all when I'm doing it. But you know, feel free if you're getting used to it. And what you're gonna do is, this is basically, now those seams are right on top of each other. So when we sew it and we press it open, it's gonna be really perfect. So now with my thumb and forefinger pinching that straight up and down, I'm gonna grab a second pin and I'm gonna put it in across that. And so I've got my one going straight up and down, holding those seams right on top of each other. And then I've got this guy going across to hold it together. So I can pull that pin and I'm good to go. If you wanted to, you could pin these edges as well, but I'm just gonna go ahead and sew. And ideally when you're sewing this, if you're eyeballing it, your needle should be coming in right where this valley is. It's kind of hard to tell because this one's light. We'll come down here. You can see it a little better there, although this is a little white too. But when you're coming out, this join where it's got that little valley there, or it makes a little triangle where they come together, should be exactly 1/4 inch away from your edge. So you can easily make adjustments. I just kind of move it around a little bit if I feel like it's not going to be right where I want it to be. And that's how I do it without having to mark or pin when I'm doing it on my sewing machine. All right, let's get this together and then our block is almost done. Now when I come to my pin, I slow down a little bit. Make sure to pull that pin. You don't want to sew over them. You can break your needle. I've had it happen. It's a little scary. So you can see here that that stitch is going right out, right in between where those guys come together. And that's how I know that my seam is going to be nice and straight when I press this open. So same deal as before. I'm just going to kind of lift and press as I go. That way I don't get any of the seams we've already pressed open accidentally going in the wrong direction. That's looking nice. Oh, and that join is fabulous. Everything is coming together right where it should be. So if you take the time to double pin and you get everything nice and lined up, this is what you're going to see every time. And those seams are so nice and flat because we pinned, or we pressed those seams open. All right, we've got 2 more steps and then our block is done. So we are going to sew 2 rectangles that kind of form sashing strips to the top part of our Bling diamond block. And what this does is it's going to kind of give the eye a place to rest. So that way you can kind of arrange your blocks by color in each one, and all the colors don't have to match with the ones that are right next to it. This is great for a scrappy quilt because then you can really just put as many colors as you want in it, and they're never going to necessarily be right next to each other. So you just have to make sure that each block looks good on its own, and then it'll just be nice as a whole. So I'm gonna leave this one to the side for a second. That's our last one to put on. So when I lay these guys right sides together, you can kind of see that this is going to extend on. So what I did, rather than having you guys cut this down first and having to lay it perfectly, is we're just gonna trim it down after we sew. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay these guys right sides together. And just like before, where we wanted to have this be about 1/4 inch out, you want to make sure that when you flip this over, let me put my blue mat underneath so you can see it a little better. So you can see, here's my diamond block, and then I've got my piece next to it. And this is about 1/4 inch, and so it is just going a little bit beyond that. So that way I can just sew 1/4 inch all the way down, And then I've got some extra at the very top of the block, and that, when I press it open, is going to be enough to be able to have that nice peak. So let's get this sewn together, and then I'll show you how to cut that and trim it down. So I chain pieced all of these. So what I did was I just sewed right off to the end, and then I would just feed the next one through and do that. And that worked really well for me. So we're gonna go ahead and press this open. And again, I am lifting and pressing as I go so I don't accidentally get some seams going the way I don't want them to. Flip it over and get it from the other side. So now I'm going to take an inch line, any of the horizontal lines, on the ruler, and I'm going to line it up with the seam line here. I'll use a big heavy one so you can see it a little better. And I'm just going to have it lined up there in the edge and just give that a trim. We're going to flip it around, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. Again, just line it up with that seam line, and then also make sure you're nice and even with the edge, and give it a trim. And so we've got that. Now we're ready to put this piece on. And again, it's the same deal. I'm going to go ahead and flip that over. And then I'm going to line this up so that we're about 1/4 inch away from the edge there. And then just sew that right sides together. I want to make sure that all my extra is at the tip of the diamond. That way there's plenty of room to trim down when we're all done. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and press that seam open. Again, I'm lifting and pressing whenever I'm coming to a seam. Press from the other side. Now we're going to trim these again. In the Clearview ruler, there also are some lines that are going across, not just your inch measurements. So what I did that is I used one of those to line up with the seam line, and then just had the side of the ruler even with the part that we already sewed on. Go ahead and trim that to create our diamond tip. Flip it around and do the same thing. Line it up with that seam line and the edge, trim, and now we have a lovely piece diamond bling. So I'm going to show you how to assemble this into rows, and then we are all done. You have all the skills you need to make this quilt at home. So this is pretty large at this point. I've got the bottom corner laid out here, so you can see I've got 3 diamonds, and we've got some of our triangles at the bottom and some of our setting diamonds on the side. It's hard to see, but I've got my little corner down here too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to sew together this top row, and so that way you can kind of get an idea of how to do this. It's basically the same as what we were doing when we were sewing our little bits together, just it's a little bit bigger. So first what I like to do is I like to lay them right sides together. So I've got a triangle down here that I'm going to lay right sides together. And then I'm going to lay this guy right sides together, and then we've got an odd man out. We have a diamond over here that also needs to be sewn together. So when I'm doing these, it's the same deal where you're going to have little offsets. So your points are going to be going in opposite directions, and you're going to want to make sure that you've got maintain that 1/4 inch. You can always mark it if you need to. The one thing you really need to know that's a little different is the points are going to line up when you've got your setting triangle. So those you want to line up exactly. And then when you come up to the top here, that's where you're going to have your offset. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this row together real quick, and you can kind of see it. Just same thing we've been doing, just a little bit larger scale. I like to do one entire row at a time, and that way I don't have to get myself as confused as I might otherwise. So I'll show you how I kind of lay this out. All right, so I've sewn my two together that I was able to arrange. I've got my odd man out setting diamond over here. So I've got, this is the middle piece, the one I sewed last. So I'm gonna lay that down. And then this is my bottom piece. I can tell that because it has my setting triangle on it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unfold this and unfold the one that came right after it, the middle one. And then what I can do is I can just lay these guys right sides together and getting them arranged and sew them down. So if I had a really big row, I would just keep going one after another, and I would just keep them in order as I was sewing, and then I was clipping the chains apart, and that way I don't have to keep laying everything back out every single time. All right, so now we've got most of our row together. I've got my setting triangle followed by all my diamonds, and then I just have my setting diamond right over here. So I can just lay that right sides together again and sew this guy together, and then I've got a whole row done, and it took almost no time. To make things more efficient, I usually wait to press until I am all done sewing the row together. And then at this point, I like to lay it back out wherever I've got the quilt arranged, design wall, spare bed, your floor, wherever you happen to be working, just to make sure that everything looks right, your row is the right size, that kind of thing. So the last thing I'm going to show you how to do is how to use that double pinning method to pin your rows together. Now the great thing about this is because we essentially created some sashing strips, you can see it kind of gives the eye a place to rest and really separates those blocks from one another. So that way it doesn't matter that this block doesn't match perfectly with this block. But because of those sashing strips, you're not really going to be able to tell if you're off just a smidgen, but we'll definitely show you how to do it on here anyway. So I'm just going to start by flipping these guys right sides together. And one thing you got to know is just like everything's been going in opposite directions, so will your seams. So you can see we've got a seam going here, and underneath it's going in the opposite way. So these guys are going to line up your sashing bits here. So for this one, I definitely usually just eyeball. So you want to put that needle in about 1/4 inch away right through those seams, and then do the same thing, eyeball about 1/4 inch away right through those seams again. If you have done it correctly, your edges should be even here. So again, still pinch that right so that the needle's going straight up and down, then go ahead and pull that. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other part of that sashing strip. Just go ahead and eyeball that 1/4 inch away, putting the pin right in the middle of those seams. And with that pin pinch going straight up and down, go ahead and pin that. Do the same thing over here. Now, one thing to note, when you get to the end, you are not going to have a sashing strip for this part. You're just going to have the one. So that is only for your bottom row that you have that. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure my edges are lined up and about the center of the block, and just go ahead and pin there. And that's really about all I pinned in this. It's just at the sashing and then in the center, and that usually keeps it pretty well good to go. I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning, sew this row together, and you can kind of see how it's starting to come together. All right, so we're going to give this one final press. At this point, we get a whole lot of seams, so it's really important that you are lifting and pressing on that iron. Otherwise, you're definitely going to press something in the wrong direction. All right, so here we have it. This is the corner of our quilt. It goes a little something like this when it is on the bed, or actually like this. And it just is set on that point, and it looks really cool, and that sashing just really helps set it apart. And again, taking that time to double pin means that these are nice and in alignment with each other, which is going to make your quilt look so much more professional. And I did get really good joins here, but again, if they are off just a little bit, you're really not going to be able to tell because of that sashing, but it will look like it's nice and in alignment as it is on your bed going like this. They'll look like they're just perfectly placed little blings. Well, thanks so much for following along with this week's tutorial. As always, everything you need to make this, including kits while supplies last, is available over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. The pattern is called Bling, and it works with fat quarters. And if you want to join Stashin with Stephanie and get 12 fat quarters every month for the price of 10, you can do that over at our website as well. And remember, you get access to this pattern plus 12 others for free when you join. So it's a really great deal, and you get new patterns every month as long as you're a Stashin with Stephanie member, and a $10 off a $20 purchase coupon code. It's a great deal. We get a lot of people doing it, and they really enjoy getting the new fun fabrics every month. Thanks so much for following along, and until next time, happy quilting.